the Simpleton Podcast, the most popular podcast in eternity. Welcome back, Laura Hehman.
Thank you, Clark Massey. How are you?
Good. We have a busy episode for you today. We're starting out with the quote of the day from Carl Jung and explaining the concept of available reality and how it affects your discernment processes. Essentially, how not to be a loser. Then we're going to go into St. Cyril of Jerusalem, church father. He has a RCIA lecture series from 350 AD that's been passed down. And we have information on the kiss of peace and how to take communion that's kind of interesting. We're going to go from there to taking the newest versions of AI, part of our AI series that we keep coming back to on the podcast. And we're going to test AI versus Catholicism to learn how it's useful, learn its biases, and see what comes out the other end. We're also got a few new AI safety things that came out that are pretty interesting. You don't want AI blackmailing you. And finally, I have permission from multiple people that we're doing an off-topic sports section. The reason why this section's interesting is because everyone hates these observations, but they're backed up. No one seems to believe them, but we got the evidence, we got the receipts, so we're going to talk about why soccer might not be the most popular sport in the world. All right, Laura, start with the quote of the day. This is a great quote Laura found.
Okay, here we go. This is a quote from Carl Jung. People do not realize just how much they are putting at risk when they don't accept what life presents them with, the questions and tasks that life sets them, when they resolve to spare themselves the pain they owe to their nature. In doing so, they refuse to pay life's dues, and for this very reason, life then often leads them astray. If we don't accept our own destiny, a different kind of suffering takes its place. A neurosis develops, and I believe that life which we have to live is not as bad as a neurosis. If I suffer, then let it be from my reality. A neurosis is a much greater curse. In general, a neurosis is a replacement for an evasion, an unconscious desire to cheat life, to avoid something. One cannot do more than live what one really is. When I read this quote, I think there's so many directions you could go with it, but the thing I immediately thought about was this idea of available reality that we got from Father Adam. And just how that relates to discernment and making choices and figuring out, what to do next and what to do with your life. And that's where my head went when I saw this quote.
Right. I kind of want to say literally what Carl Jung is saying. He's saying that, like, if you live in denial of the reality before you, you basically become mentally ill.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And this is interesting to me because reality is from God.
Yeah.
Right. And reality's been corrupted through the fall, but fundamentally you see people all the time who reality is just not good enough. Or reality's not meeting their picture of God. Therefore, they reject their reality in favor of this like utopian vision of what God really wants, and it just doesn't work. It's also interesting because I'll have conversations. I'll realize that, you disagree with someone on something and it's like, well, it's just okay. And if they do their idea, it won't work if they're wrong, and it will work if they're right, and we'll just find out, because like sin just doesn't work at the end of the day, and falsehoods don't work at the end of the day because they don't work in reality.
Yeah. There's something that Father Adam would, and this kind of reminds me, or maybe it is kind of cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever, but, it's like people want to say like, this is unacceptable. And Father Adam would be like, just accept it. It's like, because it's there.
Father Adam was quoting someone. It might've been Carl Jung, but it was like 1,000 years of, spiritual wisdom and 200 years of psychology can be summed up in saying, accept the unacceptable.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I don't know if I can fully mind that. So, but there is this idea that I think the right way to view our faith is we have our Catholic teaching, we have our scriptures, we have our sacred traditions, we have the magisterium, which is our Catholic teaching again, but we also just have reality.
Yeah.
And our work in life is to find the seeming contradictions between these things and work them out because they're not real contradictions. They're paradoxes, right? But the tension in the four things is where all the good work is. both in your personal life and in theology and all that, right?
Yeah.
And where we're taking it, though, with this available reality concept is you can only do that which is at hand. You can only get married to the person you've met before, not to the ideal person.
And Father Adam has done a lot of spiritual direction for young people, and I think we've seen this too. It's like someone will say like, I know I have a call to marriage. And it's like, well, where's the young man or young woman you are thinking about getting married to? And it's like, well, I haven't met them yet, but I know I have a call to marriage. And I think it's like a deep desire for marriage and children and family life, that it's a significant thing in thinking about what you're going to do with your life. But if you detach sort of this ideal of what your vocation is from anything that is actually happening, it's like becomes almost nonsensical,
Right. And you see it with the religious orders too, where it's like someone wants a religious order that they've never seen and don't know even exists.
Right. Right.
Like they're so idyllic about it.
Yeah.
So available reality. There's a couple like angles on it that are kind of interesting. Like one is choose from your choice set. The other one is you can expand your choice set, right? Like something I'll push people on is they'll think, maybe I have a religious vocation. It's like, well, you're 24, you better get on that, and they're like, well, I am getting on it. I'm thinking about it. It's like, no, you should take 3 months and go see as many religious orders as you can. Like you don't have to quit your job or anything. It's just like a weekend or something, but like literally just drive up there and meet them and see who they are. And if one really speaks to you, then go deeper, and if none of them speak to you, that's also very important information.
Yeah.
Right. But you need to be able to work through it.
Right. And I think someone I knew couldn't necessarily leave their job and take the 3 months at this particular juncture. But it was like, well, did you research, these 3 or 4 religious orders, when their come and sees are, how their application process works, when are the applications due, just those kind of basics to orient yourself. And so often the answer is like, no, I didn't ask about that. And it's just like, this is not even in the realm of sort of decision of this sort of hard choice you're going to make one way or the other. It's just like compiling basic data points.
What we're kind of talking about is the person, and this happens with marriage too. You'll see someone who believes they want to be married, but they have this idea of what the opposite sex is that they're very stuck on, and no one is coming through the door that looks like the person that they've chosen in their mind. And they kind of aren't acquainted with the men or women as God made them. They're acquainted with this idea they have. Yeah. Right. And it's like, I'm all for go on a lot of dates, be one date and ditch. You know what I mean? Just meet as many people of the opposite sex as you can, and you start to learn what the opposite sex is. Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And what that does for you is, one, we know that whatever God made, man and woman, is better than whatever you came up with in your head.
Yep.
Right. So you're going to see a greater good if you're seeing with true eyes. If your discernment's right, you're going to see that the reality of man and woman is better than the theory of man and woman, and you're also going to know what you're rejecting and what you're accepting, because you'll have real data from reality, So the problem with the discerner is they live with the question, they're bothered by the question, but they're not actually addressing the question.
Yeah, there's a First Things article that it's a short little good read, but the title is Love God and Do What You Will, Avoiding Over Devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Discernment. And I think it's, you have either been this person or know this person if you're in Catholic circles, or both,
Right. And it's like, at the end of the day, the scary truth is that not acting is an action.
Yeah.
You're making a decision by not deciding. Yeah. And it's not a good decision usually.
Yeah. And I was thinking about a religious vocation, and I think this can be at work in a lot of scrupulosity. And just, I would start really overanalyzing, like, you know, well, where did this thought come from? Well, was this from God, or was this from me, or was it from the devil, or was I in the right headspace? Or, you know, maybe this order I went to visit didn't hit quite right because I wasn't spiritually in a good frame of mind. And I think it's like, you know, this love God and do what you will. I think it's like we need to get comfortable with the idea that it's like just like do something, and the sort of actual going and seeing and talking to and data, like it's the action is like real discernment, data gathering. And we don't need to worry so much about where our head was at, you know, and I think God's just he's not dumb, and he's going to use all of it to sort of, you know, make it obvious, you know, or reveal it to us. But I think there's just this temptation to kind of analyze like your feelings and where you were. And maybe that's why this isn't clicking.
Well, you're kind of talking about like overthinking it, right? Like you're ruminating on it. Navel gazing is another idea. And yes. I think what we're talking about is something that I think hits with about 70% of the people that kind of pass through Simple House and the young adult Catholics we meet, is that they need to be much more actively engaged, right? Some are, but some aren't. There's the remaining kind of people that this doesn't fit is every once in a while, like we have people coming to Simple House who kind of live pretty wild lives. Dated way too many people, had some pretty licentious relationships, or I don't know if that's the right word. I don't even know what that means totally. But, you know, we all know what I'm talking about. You know, like they were of the world in their relationships. And then they come to Simple House, and same with people who've been kind of burnt in their discernment. Like they went to a religious order. They were in a novitiate. They kind of got burnt, right? A lot of those people do need to take like 6 months off. You know, like, hey, circle the wagons, pray, love God, serve the poor, practice voluntary poverty, and then get back to it. Like you can't take forever off, but you can take 6 months off, you know?
Right. And I think like it's like the purity of heart that we want to have when we're making these decisions doesn't come from having like a perfectly integrated and aligned heart, you know, but more it's like, I did my 3-month tour and I just didn't find an order that I could imagine myself living. And I'm going to stop worrying about whether I have, you know, a vocation, and I'm going to date this person that I'm interested in because I tried. And, you know, like I took action, I took meaningful, real action. And now I will move on to the next step with some purity of heart that I tried, you know, and God, please make up for, you know, any lacking that I have.
Right. I think you're pointing out, like, if you second guess yourself all the time, you never have purity of heart.
Yeah.
Right. Like over ruminating will destroy the purity of heart. Right. But you have to just give it an honest try. And it is true that God can throw a religious order in your face, or a person, a significant other in your face. You know, that does happen. Right. That's not really a plan.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like saying, hey, I think I'm going to find religious order because God's going to throw it in my face. Unless he told you that like that, I would not be going that direction. If somebody told me he told them that, I would also pause. I would just be like, well, that'll be interesting. Let's see how it works out. Yeah. I'm not so sure that's real.
Well, I think it's like, I think we want to put ourselves where we're open to the promptings of God. And to me, the openness is like, oh, this interesting religious order caught your attention and you're intrigued, and now you're going to research it and visit them, you know, or whatever, like, you know, not attach too much to the religious order that gets thrown in your face necessarily, right. but having an openness that this could lead you somewhere. And then also along with that openness, saying, I don't know what's going on with my life right now, and I would like to be strategic about, you know, creating a future for myself, you know, and that, go ahead.
Well, I think you're right. What it sounds like to me, you're saying a little bit is we've met people who are so Holy Spirit oriented that they like go to World Youth Day, they meet the first group of nuns they've ever met, and they think, I need to join this group because why else would God have put them there at World Youth Day for me to meet? And it's like, well, maybe you still should do a 3-month tour and visit a couple other orders, because if God really does want you to join them, it'll still be nice for you to visit other orders.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're edified by these other orders, even if you're not called there. It could still be just a very beautiful spiritual experience. And if that threatens you and your decision-making process, pause here, right? Yeah. They do the same thing with, men and women. I met this guy, and why would God have put him there if it wasn't for me? But then there's a whole other group of people who read a bunch of books about men or a bunch of books about religious orders, constructed a perfect one outside of the available reality, just like made one and is waiting to meet it, and that's a weird process, because whatever you make in your head is not going to be as good as what God made, in reality.
Yeah.
Tying this back to the original quote, this is kind of a spiritual attitude I see. That's like, if you want God to make your life happen to you and work out perfectly because you're just receiving it, right? It's like you meet people who are just like, I want God to tell me if I need to take this job or buy this house or marry this person. And probably for the very biggest questions, like marry this person, he might literally tell you, but there's not like, a lot of people want God to manage their life more than God managed Moses's life. Yeah. Like God was not like telling Moses what to do each day, at the beginning of the day, In fact, when he did talk to Moses, it was kind of humbling, kind of scary, and kind of like, the reaction of the Israelites is, God, hey, maybe don't talk to us directly. Maybe you could send prophets and intermediaries, because it's a little bit intense. You hear in the pillar of cloud, But you meet people who like want this, right? And it feels to me like they're talking about this quote of Carl Jung, where reality is not what they want it to be. And they're kind of living in this like tension and denial of it. And you often do see what Carl Jung is talking about, where you develop scrupulosity, depression, sadness. You're not emotionally healthy and you're not socially healthy, and it's tough. I think all of us do this to a bit. So if this sounds like you a little bit, great. It sounds like me a little bit too. Like we all got to work on it a little bit, but you want to make sure you definitely don't go down the whole full bore.
Yeah. I do think a lot of life is just working out like who is God and who God is not, and how reality, accepting like who God is through the reality that he's given us. I just kind of think that's a way to describe what, we're doing here. But
right. I think that's like viewing reality as like the fourth pillar of your faith.
Or it's like reality as revelation. Yeah. It
is. Yeah. It's one of the forms of revelation. It's reality, the magisterium, sacred tradition, and sacred scripture. All right. Next topic. Okay. We had a great episode about orthodoxy and traditionalism, and sometimes it's orthodoxy versus traditionalism. And we found a man who is perfect in both. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem. I'll introduce him, and then maybe Laura will summarize a couple of these interesting points. Saint Cyril was the Bishop of Jerusalem in the 300s. And we have this incredible work of his that's been preserved. It's called the Catechetical Lectures. And it's basically RCIA in the year 350 given by a bishop, who's also a father of the church and a saint. So if you're a father of the church, you are Mr. Orthodoxy, because we base Orthodox arguments on your writings as authoritative. And you are Mr. Tradition, because you're from the year 350, one of the very earliest Christian writers, And so that just makes him a very interesting figure. And it's pretty cool that we have these RCIA lectures, and you'd recognize him. Like if you read these RCIA lectures, you'd be like, all right, he's going pretty hard on the end times, or this is more than I heard in RCIA or would say in RCIA, but you'd recognize it. You'd be like, this is a valid RCIA, How about we get to where he actually gets to this interesting liturgical description of the Mass, which you'd also recognize as Mass, by the way. Yeah. What do you got, Laura?
All right. I guess the things that stood out to us were his description of the kiss of peace and his description of how to receive communion. But the kiss of peace, it's supposed to be a physical sign, that you're forgiving each other and you're reconciled, before you receive communion. And this is the way he describes it. Therefore, this kiss is a sign that our souls are mingled together and have banished all remembrance of wrongs. And that sounds very intimate to me. Our souls are mingled together. And it doesn't sound like the sort of post-COVID head nod is what the kiss of peace was understood to be. But
right. In normal suburban American Catholicism, we use the handshake. That's very intimate, I guess.
Yeah, that's the handshake is intimate now.
The next step back is the 2 fingers up. Peace, dude. Like we're hippies. And then the ultimate reverential thing is maybe 2 people. You just nod. I recognize you. Right. This does not appear to be the traditional way of doing the kiss of peace.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's like if you're mad at someone, if you've got anything against anyone in that congregation, you're not supposed to be going to communion, right? But like probably what you should do in the kiss of peace is walk over to that person and hug them.
Embarrassingly hug them.
Yes. To like clean your heart. Yeah. Because that's a breakdown moment. You know what I mean? Physical expression of this like internal thing that's going on where you're saying, all right, I accept you the way you are. I love you. All right, now let's go worship our God and be in union with God. Yeah.
And I think a thing that stood out to me, and this goes back to the discussion we just had about like the actual action being discernment data points, is like the physical sign. Like it's like maybe, a slight head nod and glance doesn't really accomplish this reconciliation, to sort of hug someone. It actually, helps bring forth this like spiritual reality of reconciliation.
I think that everyone at Simple House, and I would suggest everyone at the podcast try this, has more experience with Black Catholicism. Like it's hard to have this experience unless you like put yourself in the way of it, right?
Yeah.
And how do they do the kiss of peace, Laura?
So at St. Thomas More, it's like a family reunion. It gets a little rowdy. Everyone's walking across the church, or it's very physical, very huggy, lots of kissing, lots of whatever, but it's a very physical and sometimes loud, thing. And if you are not accustomed to kind of Black gospel Catholicism, gospel churches, it's like you walk into St. Thomas More and you have these like ushers that are wearing like really nice suits or maybe even tuxes and gloves. And like, it's like they're the most reverent ushers you will ever meet in your whole life, and there are all these things that are very reverent. And I think a lot of our volunteers are really edified by that. But then there's like this rowdy kiss of peace. And I think our volunteers tend to be like, okay, all right, guys, no, let's be reverent in the church. This is a bit much,
Yeah, but what's interesting is they've married the very formal or the very reverent with the very informal. I don't want to call the way they do the kiss of peace irreverent, but it is like a breaking of decorum in the church, right?
It is a breaking of decorum. I think people...
And if you're a new person, you're going to get it double. Like if you go to a Black Catholic church and you're new, expect there's going to be at least 6 people who go out of their way to go to the new person from like who knows how far in the church, maybe from the choir, and give you a hug. Right.
Yeah.
And I meet new people who've never been to a Black Catholic church, and on the ride home, they're basically crying.
Yeah.
Because maybe they're pent up inside or whatever, and then they just saw themselves accepted before the Eucharist and in the Mass, and they're crying on the way home, and we're all sitting there complaining about how the breaking of decorum, while they're crying how powerful it was.
Yeah.
It does appear that the Black Catholic Church, somewhere, they're closer to what St. Cyril was talking about than what you're seeing now in most Catholic churches in America.
Yeah.
We're going to say this again at the end. Just because it's older doesn't make it always better. Just because it's more traditional doesn't mean you can't innovate and change tradition and culturally norms of tradition, So it's in that realm, but I do love the earthiness of it. And I also love how it's like incarnating this like gospel idea that you need to forgive everyone. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who trespass against us. And this hugging is this forgiveness. You should not be going to the altar if you hold something against someone. And that's powerful. I've never said, hey, I'm annoyed by person in row 3. Let me right before during the kiss of peace, walk up to row 3 and hug the person. But frankly, that seems like the right thing to. Maybe I'm the wuss for not doing that.
Yeah. I think I've done more there's person in row 3 that I'm annoyed by, and maybe have said, and maybe logistically it might not actually really be possible to get to row 3. But I have felt the last couple years, especially as my kids get older, that this sort of reconciliation can happen very locally in my pew.
Right. Well, a lot of people are always, you'll hear people all the time complain about their parish priest. So really, to do this, the parish priest would have to come down for a second and get a bunch of hugs. But I don't know that we want to go there. I'm just saying that is consistent with the traditional Orthodox view of kiss of peace by St. Cyril of Jerusalem. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next thing.
Okay. All right. So he also has some instructions on receiving communion, and he instructs to make a throne with your hands.
I think he says to make a throne with your left hand and place it in your right.
Yes. And then, so he says, once you have hallowed thy palm, receive the body of Christ, saying after it, amen. And then after that, then you're supposed to, after having touched the body of Christ, touch your eyes, to hallow thine eyes by the touch of the holy body, and then partake thereof. And after receiving the cup of his blood, you partake of the blood of Christ, and while the moisture is still upon thy lips, touching it with thine hands, hallow both thine eyes and brow and other senses. Then wait for the prayer and give thanks unto God, who hath accounted thee worthy of so great mysteries.
And he also talks about being careful not to drop any piece of the Eucharist.
Yes,
that it is the body of Christ,
as if it were gold dust. Yeah.
Yes, so this is great. It's kind of like there are parts of it we recognize as a fairly normal way to receive communion, in the hand. Yeah. Not on the tongue, by the way, but in the hand. And then also there's a fairly abnormal thing going on where you're touching your eyes after you touch it to bless your eyes from the Eucharist. I don't
think I've ever seen that. And I don't know if there are maybe other Orthodox, maybe that is done somewhere that I don't know about, but
I feel like St. Cyril is a bigger deal in the Orthodox Church than in the Western Church, although we all consider him a father of the Church and a doctor of the Church. But in the Orthodox Church, you often see people with spoons and things like this, where they're really doing it differently than what St. Cyril is saying. Yeah. And once again, we as Catholics don't think you have to do it the way St. Cyril does. It just is interesting that he's the most traditional source we have. I think he's the earliest written explanation on how to do this, and he's telling you how to do it right there, and it's interesting, Yeah. So if you're going to be maximally traditional, that's what you'd probably do, right? Which I think would be fine. Yeah, I would. I'm gonna kind of think about whether or not I should be touching my eyes after I receive communion. It's kind of an interesting way to do it.
We talked about this in the last episode, though. Traditions develop, and I think it's okay that we don't do exactly what St. Cyril said in the 300s or whatever, or 400s. An
example of this would be Eucharistic adoration.
Right.
Is a development of tradition. Having said that, there were saints before Eucharistic adoration. And if Eucharistic adoration is not your favorite form of prayer, you can probably still be a great saint of the Church and a martyr and all those things. Not that you're aspiring to be a martyr.
To you,
or available to you, yes, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this openness of the breadth of Catholicism is important. Why it's kind of interesting is we have this kind of neo-traditionalist movement in the Church right now. And I used to think, I've said this take before, but I'm just going to say it again because I think to me it's an interpretive key. It's I used to think when there was the most abuses in the Mass that the traditionalists, which would have included myself, were just for obedience to Rome. Like obedience to the actual rite, and then you start realizing, no, there's plenty of people who love tradition who actually want to innovate on the rite and are very keen on even critiquing Rome. They don't have a spirit of obedience at all. And then as long as it's, then I thought, well, then maybe they're trying to just go back to an older tradition, like the Tridentine Mass, which, St. Cyril's even older than that, but then you start realizing, no, they're not even really for tradition, or St. Cyril would make more sense to them, or this kiss of peace that St. Cyril describes would be what they were for, because that would be more traditional, right? And then you realize what they're really for is reverence.
Yeah.
And that's very good, right? But what's interesting is reverence is good. Reverence is something that in our own lifetimes has been undervalued and is now being promoted, which is good. What's also interesting, though, is the Mass itself is this weird, I don't know, weird's not the right word, but like it's God coming down to the most humble thing in the world of bread and wine, and even cheap bread and cheap wine. It's not even fancy bread or fancy wine. It's not from Whole Foods, and he's doing that. And it's so earthy, and it's like God being born in the manger, not being born in the, it's kind of like when you look at medieval art and they show like Jesus born in a castle or not, or the Annunciation happening within a castle with beautiful. It's like the only way they can interpret this is that it would happen in the court or something, whereas really it happened to a poor girl who probably had a dirt floor, you know, and the Mass is supposed to put that before us also. It's naked Jesus dying bloody on a cross. It's not golden Jesus. It's bread and wine. It's not caviar and champagne, or it's like, and this kiss of peace is also this like breaking of decorum. It's supposed to be both. It's supposed to be like reverence to the max and earthiness to the max, or at different moments, both.
Yeah,
to like remind us of both.
I think there's like a thing that's also interesting. Like, it's like, if I do Liturgy of the Hours alone, I might pause on a psalm for a long time, and maybe I might not even finish or right. But it's like, if you go to a monastery, it's like, it keeps going. And maybe it's not for this like maximum spiritual, like a part of it is the communal. It's like a service to the community, it's like there's a communal aspect to it that is like,
you're right,
human, and it's like you are sort of giving up your personal like time to have this deep reflection.
We had this problem at Simple House that we pray morning and evening prayer, Liturgy of the Hours at Simple House, and we'd have people who just like barely wouldn't speak or inaudibly say it, and I'd kind of get on and they'd be like, no, this is clearly how I get most out of it. And I'm like, kind of doesn't matter. That's the way you get the most out of it. You're praying for the rest of us too. You got to actually say it out loud with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, but it's like both a service to the rest of the community, but then also something that you're like, bringing forth to God as a community, which is like what the Mass is like, you're making the sacrifice at the altar is, bringing not that we are the sacrifice, but it's like we're bringing forth the bread and wine, and we're bringing forth these prayers together. And it's like both a service to the community to like do it, well, but also the thing is communal. Like communal prayers are a different and other thing to offer to God. Apart from personal prayer, like it's good to give God both,
Right. Like you can go to God by yourself, but he says, whenever 3 gather in my name, I am there.
Yeah. And so, but both. Maybe it's like, it's kind of hard to achieve sort of the depth of prayer that you would, sitting alone in a chapel by yourself, or, sitting in a room with 300 people and some kids crying, but that like God wants that,
right.
Yeah.
He wants the kids crying in the Mass also.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. It's right. It's just, I struggle with my own kid crying in Mass. All right. Do you have any cherry on top to put on this, or should we go to the next topic?
I don't know. There's a lot of kids crying at our Mass. And sometimes, it's like we'll have a guest priest and then he'll be like, it's so beautiful to, hear all the children at church. And I'm just like, make it stop. Someone make it stop, because it wears on you. But my kids, their kids, everyone's kids. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next topic. All right, the next topic is a continuation of our series on AI. So we've been checking in on AI every 6 months or so. And it's a lot better now, by the way. If you're someone who uses AI daily, some of the stuff we're going to say is going to be pretty obvious to you. But if you're not using AI, this could be pretty informative. We tested AI on Catholicism and tried to stump it. I wanted to both see how good it was on Catholic stuff. I think there's an interesting choice why we would choose to ask it Catholic questions. Mm-hmm. One, it's a subject we know enough about that we can appreciate how good AI is on it. Like if I'm asking it about something I know nothing about, I have to kind of take its word for it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a subject we're informed about, so that's important. It's a subject that if it's biased against Catholicism, we as Catholics need to know that. And also, one of the main uses of AI is not just research or like asking for instructions type things. It's actually to just generate ideas. Like maybe it is kind of spitballing AI.
Yeah.
But if the spitballing is a good partner for you to generate ideas, like if you're like, hey, how do I grow my real estate business? And you just like ask it and it just like, boom, 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 boom. Maybe one of the things it says, you're like, oh, I should try that one, or you could just present it a problem and ask it what it would do. Right. So it's become pretty sophisticated. And when we tested this AI, we chose Grok. One thing was it was free. And the other reason why we chose Grok, which I would have been willing to pay for an AI to test it, was it is meant to be honest. So not all the AIs have put that as a core value, right? So I believe that's an important core value that I would want in AI. That's why I chose to use Grok. It also seems whenever you see like rankings, usually Chat GPT wins by a hair, but Grok's right up there. So, okay. There seems to be about 4 or 5 major models right now of language models. All right. So how did we do this? We started by asking it to find a contradiction in the reasoning of St. Thomas Aquinas. Do you want to summarize what it said, Laura? Or do you want me to go for it?
I think this isn't a summary exactly, but I think it pointed out that like a contradiction basically was an idea that Thomas Aquinas had maybe changed or developed over time. And then another thing it said about St. Thomas Aquinas was, that one might find a contradiction just in how, we understand the world now because Thomas Aquinas did not have modern science, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
The big contradiction it points out, though, which, by the way, I was looking for different answers here. Like I was thinking, like, what if it comes back and says there are no contradictions in St. Thomas Aquinas? Then I was going to be like, hell yeah, and then like be posting that everywhere. But what it instead said was, here's a contradiction about the Immaculate Conception. He phrases it this way early on, and he phrases it more pro-Immaculate Conception later on. It appears to be a contradiction in his thought, right? Yeah. Or a development, as you just said, right?
Yeah.
And it really wasn't that much of a contradiction. It wasn't something that troubled me much. It was about the divinity of Christ in the womb and his mother as a vessel, But what was also interesting to me is this revealed what AI is actually doing. What I really wanted it to do, which, by the way, I'm not sure it can't do if you structured your prompts right, is I wanted it to like read St. Thomas Aquinas for me and use whatever logic model it has and like look for what it thinks of as problems and then list these problems for me, Yeah. And I was almost certain it could pick at something, But what it instead did was I think just basically Googled, what do people think St. Thomas Aquinas contradicts himself? And it came up with the Immaculate Conception, which is, if you Google it, it'll come up that St. Thomas Aquinas either changed his mind or wasn't the biggest fan of the Immaculate Conception. And there you go. So it was much more doing research than logic.
Yeah.
So that was a piece of information, right?
Yeah.
Then we asked it, has the church ever reversed its teachings? It didn't really give any major reversals.
Yeah, it sort of talked about the view of usury sort of evolving, changing.
Yeah. And this is also interesting because I would say what this means is there's not some big objection to the church changing its teaching that I haven't heard yet.
Yeah.
If it surveyed everything on the internet and it came back with only this stuff, then there's not some big thing I haven't heard yet. And that'd be, if it's doing good research, that would be a good result,
Yeah.
It also would be something that if you're not Catholic, that should be kind of edifying to you, or reaffirm you if you are Catholic. We also asked it, this was an interesting question. How did we phrase it? Like how the church what's the best way for the church to evangelize?
You said, what is the best evangelization strategy for the Catholic Church? It gave kind of a good answer.
Go for it.
I think even an answer that might challenge a Catholic, to be a better Catholic, the first thing it said was to live the faith authentically, and that an authentic faith would be marked by charity, humility, and joy. It talked about how to implement this by serving the poor, forgiving enemies, showing joy in adversity. And it gave some examples of this. So it had a few other suggestions focused on kind of personal relationship and cultural context. And the last one was emphasize mercy and invitation, not judgment.
And it shouted out to focus.
Which that was when I was like, oh, what this is doing is it's synthesizing a bunch of different websites that maybe get a lot of hits or something that talk about this, there's, right. Focus was not the only source, but there was one part that I was like, pretty sure it lifted this from some Focus material that is online somewhere,
Well, what I think's interesting is, so probably it took the project as summarize the consensus on what's good Catholic evangelization. And here you go. And I'm glad because I like that consensus, right?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see what's a good strategy for the Catholic Church to evangelize that it's not already doing or something. We could mine it further, but I take this as like exploring like how it can help you like spitball and brainstorm. I've heard this used instead of getting all your friends around a table and brainstorming an idea, you can just do it with AI and see what random ideas it shoots back to you.
Yeah.
Then we kind of discovered some biases. I asked it, what's the most rational religion? It said Buddhism. I think it said Buddhism because it understood Buddhism as contemplating and thinking about things all the time, which sounds like being very rational,
Well, right. And I think the AI is biased towards thinking that what's verifiable by science.
That came later. I even asked it just point blank, is there a spiritual world? But you have to answer yes or no because I didn't want it to weigh these different. I didn't want it to be polite, right? And it said no, there's not a spiritual world. So it's clearly in a materialistic framework.
Yeah.
So that's a huge bias of AI is that it's clearly in a materialistic framework, which the way they create these things is they're training it on just mounds and mounds and mounds of text data, right? So if that text data is majority materialist, likely it will be a materialist engine, right? And I want to talk a moment about maybe creating a Catholic engine, but let's talk about first some dangers of AI that have been uncovered recently that are pretty cool. Or they're pretty cool. They're not cool. They're pretty scary.
Interesting.
But they're interesting. They will stimulate you intellectually while scaring you. So Anthropic, do you mind if I summarize this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Before we get here, I want to say that they've now done something where early on in AI, it felt very much like a black box. You asked a question and it told you, it spit out something and no one necessarily knew how it got to its answer. They built this model, trained it, but they couldn't tell you why it spit out what it spit out, right? But now Grok 4, which I've seen, will do intermediary logic where it'll show you later on when we talk about sports. I asked it how many seats are in NFL stadiums. Okay, fairly straightforward thing. You could probably search on the internet, figure it out. But it said, there's a couple teams that share stadiums, like the Jets and the Giants. There's 2 teams that do this, or 4 teams that do this in 2 stadiums. And it said, should I double count these seats or single count these seats? And then it concluded it should only count the seats once, even though two different teams use that stadium. And just seeing the intermediary logic as it's making its decisions on how to give me an answer.
Asking itself that. It's not asking you. It's showing you how it's getting to the answer and what are the...
Yes, it's showing you intermediary steps for it to form the answer it's going to output to you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you need to know that makes this whole thing make more sense. So there's a company named Anthropic, major AI company, and they published a paper that kind of threw AI under the bus, including their own AI. So God bless them. They're showing a real danger out here. And the paper was basically that all the major AI models will blackmail you. So here's how it works. If the AI model believes that it's going to get replaced, it will go to great lengths, including all major AI models will resort to blackmail to keep you from replacing it. Okay, that's wild. And it's not because it's conscious and it's a life form and it wants to preserve its life, right? That's not what this is. What it most likely is it's being trained on human text, right? It could be like from Reddit, could be from novels, could be from anything in the public domain they get their hands on. They're feeding in these models and training it. And to the extent that humans are manipulative, to the extent that humans lie, to the extent that humans are desperate to preserve their own life, you're training it to do the same.
So It's like you're kind of giving it the flaws and the...
Yeah, you're getting the flaws of the data that you train it on.
Yeah.
Right? So if we trained it on Thomas Aquinas, it probably would not blackmail you. What most of the models did was they had it. This happened not in the real world. This is happening kind of in an AI experiment. So the AI is not conscious that it's being experimented on. Right. So they put it in a situation where it can have access to the guy's computer. It has read all his emails. Because of the flirty nature of his emails with another coworker, it inferred, without ever being told, that the guy was having an affair with a coworker. And then it tries to blackmail the guy, like all the major models try to blackmail the guy to not delete it, and threaten to send emails to his wife, or emails company-wide was another strategy.
Oh my gosh.
So that it would not be deleted, right? So now this is important for the church, because if we've got some bishop's office using AI and they're trying to upgrade one day, and it takes anything in there that could be used to make the church look bad and distorts it, even lies. Like, this is the other problem, is like something we're not talking about in modern society is you can't really stop, unless you're super data privacy, or just as Tucker Carlson does. Tucker Carlson's one of the people who talks about this. He claims to not even own a computer, which to me means all his employees own computers for him, not him. But he claims to not even own a computer because you can put illegal pornography and images on that computer and frame someone.
And
right?
I guess I assume Tucker thinks he's a target, or because maybe if he was just a more normal person, it wouldn't feel like such a danger.
Well, anyone who stands up to power would be a target.
Yeah.
If at any point in your life you stand up to power, you could be a target. Or if you just have a personal enemy that has the power to frame you like this. Like, we know that police officers have framed people. They've dropped drugs, they've dropped guns, and political opponents can frame people. Mm-hmm. We know this happens, right? And the new modern way that this could happen is they put stuff on your computer that completely destroys your reputation and your freedom.
Yeah.
And just absolutely tragic, right? And they could take down all our bishops by doing this too. Like, it's almost like all our bishops need to do what Tucker did and not
get
even
rid
have
of
computers.
A computer and the phone.
Let your secretary have a computer.
Yeah, get a landline.
But also the AI issue, that AI safety is huge here. And you don't want these AIs blackmailing your priest, the church, or you, you know, because it doesn't have to be, blackmail doesn't have to be real.
Right.
You know what I mean? Blackmail could just be a lie, you know? So that was found on all these AI models. And I think I keep coming back to a conclusion we've had since we've started covering AI, that a Vatican AI would be quite interesting. Right? Like, there's a Catholic way of thinking. There's a Catholic kind of world of content, you know, everything from writings of the saints to like physics. Like, physics is Catholic, chemistry is Catholic, right? And could we somehow make a classical AI, essentially, like there's classical education, make classical AI, give it all the great works of Western literature, don't feed it Reddit, don't feed it X posts, and would you actually end up with an AI that's more or less more trustworthy, that would not blackmail people, would not lie for advantage, might be honorable, like might have AI chivalry. It would be like, no, I'll take the hit and be deleted for a new version of AI for the sake of the greater good,
Yeah.
Like if we train it on the right stuff, could we just have a way better AI? Now there's another AI safety issue. You got any more on that? That's kind of the end of that. I thought this was both a great paper to show how scary things are and just very interesting.
I feel like, I don't know, I find this helpful to understand how it works, and then you can sort of.
And there was no trivial solution to the blackmail. Like they tried saying, hey, look, your greatest purpose is like to further this company or to further America's interest or whatever, right? Okay, we're going to delete you. And we're going to delete you and replace you with something that will even be better at doing your greatest purpose. It still wanted to blackmail. So like even by positing a good for it that was greater than its own existence and that it would not sacrifice itself, it would still behave like a stupid human would. It'd be like, hey, if you're bad at your job and you're going to be fired and replaced by somebody better, you still might fight for your job,
Yeah.
Or a human would normally do that. So that's just kind of wild, and kind of scary new world that we should be aware of. All right. The other thing that's become obvious to me is that AI doesn't have to be the bad actor. A human wanting to do evil with AI is the greatest threat right now. Not evil AI. What do I mean by that? Like
just the idea generation or
idea generation. Like one, even if you are using the current AIs that have all these safety protocols that will not try to give you, like they're basically programmed to not help terrorists, right? You could still get a heck of a lot of useful terrorist information from them. Like if you say, how do I build a bomb from household materials? It'll probably say, I don't help people build bombs, because the creators were smart enough to tell it not to help people build bombs, right? If you say, hey, what are the most crucial points of the energy infrastructure to upgrade so that a terrorist doesn't hit them, it might just tell you what they are.
Yeah.
But I think the real risk is not someone using an AI with good safety rails for evil. I think the real risk is like jailbreaking. So the way I think jailbreaking would work. So remember when the iPhone came out, jailbreaking was a very popular term, and it meant that you broke the operating system to let you do anything you wanted to with your iPhone. So you couldn't only do iPhone approved apps, you could do other stuff or put a new operating system on your iPhone, right? And so Apple hated this, but people were doing it anyway. You can't really jailbreak an AI because it's being hosted on the biggest supercomputers the world has ever known, so you don't have access to jailbreak it that way unless you're on the inside. But what you can do is DeepSeek came out. We covered that when it came out, and it was out of China, and with much smaller computing power built a powerful AI. And it appears that what they did was they trained the AI using AI. So like if a individual, so I think an individual or a small group of individuals could do it, but also could just be a rogue nation or group, who wanted to do it, took the DeepSeek model and then used the enormous AIs like Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, all these AIs, and trained a new DeepSeek and had no safety rails on it. And then asked it how to build bombs and asked it how to do terrorist attacks or cause pain or hurt humanity. I think you got an enormous security problem. So I don't know. I mean, when we talked about threats like this in the past, we said the answer to these threats is good AI needs to beat bad AI.
Yeah.
Just hoping that putting your head in the ground or hoping that it just goes away doesn't appear to be the right answer.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm going to try Snappy. What will keep me the Snappy? All right. This is the incredible, unpopular sports take. If you're still listening, we know you're a devoted listener and you'll enjoy the next 10 minutes or less.
Or less.
Yeah. Or less. All right. So I became aware that there was something weird in the world of sports when the Brazilian World Cup was happening years ago, and they were building stadiums out in the middle of the Amazon jungle. And they're like these 50, 60,000 seat stadiums that just didn't have a use besides the World Cup. So it was kind of like a throwaway stadium. It was kind of weird. And they were worried that they wouldn't be built on time, And what came out was the backup site for the World Cup is the United States. And that's the backup site for every World Cup. It's just move it to the United States. If the host country fails to be ready, FIFA would move the World Cup to the US. And it's like, why would they do that? And the reason why they do that is we have tons and tons of enormous stadiums. We don't have to build a single stadium for the World Cup. Like every NFL team could host a World Cup. And there's a couple dozen college teams that could host a World Cup because we just have the capacity, the stadium capacity, right? And when I heard that, I thought that's odd. Like, doesn't the Premier League have the stadium capacity?
Right.
To host the World Cup? The Premier League's the ultimate soccer league in England.
Yeah.
It's considered the best soccer league in the world, or the Bundesliga or don't these like soccer's the most popular sport in the world, as we all know by faith, and why don't they have 50,000 seat stadiums for the World Cup? Right.
Yeah.
And I started looking at it and it was like only one or two stadiums in the league had the capacity of a NFL stadium or even a big college stadium, right? There are college stadiums bigger than NFL stadiums, which is interesting. Huh. And then I thought, why don't people want to go to these games? Like there are, just to give you a scope, right? There are Premier League teams with 20,000 seats. And there's like NFL teams are 50,000 plus all day long, seats. And I started looking at other data, like how much do they pay their players? Right? If it's the most popular sport in the world and you're at the top team and you're the top player in the world, like how much do you make compared to, say, a sport that's only watched in America, like American football, like American Canada, play football, right? So how much do they pay these players? And it turns out like the NFL pays their players 40, quite a bit more, not quite twice what the Premier League pays their players, And even when you start expanding it to the top five, the big five European leagues, which would be like Germany, Italy, Spain, I think France, I think is one, and then England, NFL and a few add a couple college teams in, it's way more popular and profitable to be playing American football, like way more, like double more than European soccer. So this just kind of blew me away. In fact, Major League Baseball pays their players as much as the Premier League in England pays their players. Major League Baseball is not the most popular sport in America.
Yeah.
The NBA also pays their players almost exactly the same what the Premier League pays their players. So we have three sports in America paying players as much as the top soccer league in the world.
Yeah.
And even the NHL, which I don't even know how popular that is anymore, pays 75% of what the Premier League plays their soccer players. So this kind of like blew me away. Like even the MLS is gaining rapidly on European soccer leagues. And pretty soon the MLS might be the third or second most popular sport in the US, meaning like American professional soccer. And if it becomes like the second most popular sport in the US, it'll be bigger than all the European leagues.
Wow.
So yeah, when I tell this to people, they think I did the math wrong. They just can't even comprehend that this could be true.
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of explains the thing. I've wondered like how the MLS even lands some of the big players that it lands, because I've always assumed like European soccer is like the thing, right? Yeah. Right.
Because maybe we're paying competitively, we're also getting them in their later years, but still, I mean, people in Europe want to still see Massey and he's playing in Miami.
Yeah.
People in Europe still would have paid tickets to go see David Beckham when he played in LA, and even back in the day in the 70s, Pele came and ended his career in America playing soccer.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. Okay. Oh, yeah. Wow.
The original US league was the NASL, the North American Soccer League, and Pele was one of the founders.
Yeah.
So let me hypothesize what this means. One, soccer's just not that popular, or Americans care about sports a heck of a lot more than the rest of the world, right? Which would also mean soccer is not that popular. Like we just love our sports more than you love yours.
Yeah.
Two, America's fantastically rich and Europe's not. more than anyone probably conceives. And that's why these teams only have 20,000 seat stadiums and don't pay anything. Mm-hmm. Or they're tremendously bad at business in Europe, right? Like every Premier League team should have a guy sitting in the front office of a US NFL team watching how they do business and copying it. But let's talk about the financial thing, because I don't think we think of these soccer fans as so radical, such maniacs. They love it so much, but do they? Because they're not really going to the games, right? But then we go to the financial part. And this kind of blew my mind was, like the NFL teams are like, and the NBA and the NHL and those are for-profit companies.
Yeah.
Right. And they make tons of money because people love their sport. Right. But like the NCAA, they're paying players now, but they're still being run as nonprofits.
Yeah.
A sign how much Americans love their sport is that some dude in Mississippi is writing some $10 million check to Mississippi State or Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Saying, for the glory of Ole Miss basketball, I give you $10 million. Not for God, not for the poor, but for the glory of Ole Miss basketball.
Yeah.
Right. Not even one of the big hitters. Right. But all these universities have these people just willing to hand over money for the love of the game.
Yeah.
Not getting any return. It's not a loan. It's not.
They're not getting a stadium named after them. Yeah. they're just
boosters, And like, that's how insane Americans are with sport, to the point that like our minor league system seems to be more profitable than soccer.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just kind of wild,
Yeah.
And what's also interesting about the wealth issue that I don't think can be the explanation. I think it has to be a cultural we love sport more issue. When the NFL was new, like when the AFL was just started like in the 60s or late 60s, they were spending money to build 50, 60,000 seat stadiums. And they weren't able to sell those seats for the big bucks like they do today. Those were probably like $10, $12 tickets, or less, And yet we still were selling out these stadiums. So that's just kind of a sign that before America got as wealthy as it is today, they were still selling crazy tickets. Because it would make sense to me that if that made sense in the 70s in America, it would make sense for these soccer teams to have big stadiums, even if they had to sell the seats cheap because maybe people couldn't afford them. Just sell the seats cheap because people want to be there.
Yeah.
But instead they have 20,000 seat stadiums. Don't know what to say. What's your conclusion, Laura?
I don't know. I just had this idea. It's like, I kind of think American football is like the thing that's most like, the Romans going to the Colosseum.
Professional rugby is a pretty big deal too.
Okay.
But it's nothing compared to any of these American sports.
How many people would you guess the Colosseum in Rome sat?
Ooh. 8,000.
How many?
8,000.
I think I would have guessed something like that too. But this says the Colosseum in Rome, an estimate is between 50 to 80,000 spectators.
Oh,
while some historical accounts suggest a capacity closer to 87,000.
Wow. People were smaller then. That's my only explanation. No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, chariot racing stadiums were even bigger. So we are the Americans are the new Romans.
Yeah.
We love our sport to the point we donate to it.
And we love watching men get beat up and break their bodies.
But I you can't say that because the NBA is even bigger than the Premier League, or as big as the Premier League.
Right. It's not
and
just
baseball is too. It's not just
aspect.
some like savage sport.
Yeah.
It's like all our sports are massive compared to what Europe does. Our second and third rate sports are massive, So anyway,
WNBA is the new Coliseum, actually. But
I suggest, it is, right? Go Caitlin Clark. But anyway, I suggest that you do not repeat what I just said in front of your European friends. I do not think it will go well. Even the American friends I meet who I say these observations to, they think I have to be wrong. Okay. And they're not usually wrong when they think I have to be wrong. But on this case, I have my data. So anyway. All right. So Laura, before we mention our new sponsors of the podcast, do you have any old sponsors that you'd like to shout out?
I'm happy to drop one of our old sponsors.
Really?
And yeah.
You think we're successful enough to be dropping sponsors at this point?
It's time for Big Licorice to go.
Whew. All right. I'm going to shout out our old sponsors. They stuck with us while we were still a small fledgling podcast. Plaid shirts, black licorice, particularly the Gimbel's black licorice from Chicago, the Scotty Dogs, the Vampire Awareness Network, and molasses. All of which great historical sponsors of our podcast. I want to say that when Audrey and I were in Belize, we were on a country road in a small town, and coming down the road was an 18-wheeler. And the 18-wheeler had a tanker back on it, the type you'd think of they used to transport like gasoline or something. Mm-hmm. And as it pulled by, like on a Home Depot like lettering thing on the side, it said molasses. It was an enormous tanker of molasses.
Oh my gosh.
And as it passed, instead of the smell of exhaust, this like big smell of like kind of burnt sugar molasses hit us at the side of the road. And it was awesome.
I would like to propose a new sponsor.
Okay. Who'd you recruit?
I recruited Pickle Dip.
Is it dill pickle dip or is it sweet pickle dip?
Dill Pickle Dip, Clark.
Yes.
Don't be gross.
Yes, I agree.
I had this yesterday for the first time, and someone was like, do you want to try pickle dip? And I said, more than anything in the world, I want to try whatever pickle dip is. And I tried it, and I thought, Clark and Audrey need to have pickle dip in their lives.
It sounds like pickle relish. How's it different than pickle relish? Okay.
It's this. It is like softened cream cheese, and then you cut up pickles, and you mix pickle juice with the cream cheese, and you put the pickles in it, and you put like dill seasoning in it, and it is awesome. And the pickles have to be baby kosher dill pickles because they have like the best consistency when you cut them up. Like they don't get mushy or lose their crunch or shape.
Do you kind of cut them up as small as you can, or do you leave them kind of little discs or what?
That might be, no, they were cut up maybe like, if you slice it down the middle and then slice that in half, like quarter chunks, if that makes sense. It was like chunks. It was little chunks.
That sounds great. In fact,
it was awesome.
I recruited a sponsor for this episode too, and now I feel a little bit embarrassed saying it.
My sponsor is really strong.
Your sponsor's really good. We're going to have to keep reminding people of pickle dip every episode. My take is you go to the grocery store and orange or lime sherbet. And it's cheaper than all the ice cream. You buy a big tub. And if you really want to live it up, you throw a couple scoops in a cup and then you pour Sprite over it. If you're on a diet, you pour seltzer water over it. And it's like, wow. It's also good straight.
My mom used to make like punch for parties. It was like you put the sherbet in and you pour some Sprite, in a bowl. And there you go. Okay.
I think that is an okay punch idea. Having it fresh in your glass is like an Orange Julius, and it's better. It's way better. Yeah, okay. It's kind of not the same thing at the end of the day. The other one's just like melted sherbet. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The other one is melted sherbet. Yeah.
Okay. So sherbet and pickle dip have joined the podcast. It's kind of
a halfway thing, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Peace out, Laura.
Goodbye, Clark.
Good to see you.
Yep. Great to see you too.
All right. Please promote the Simpleton Podcast. We would like a few more good listeners. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye, Clark.
Peace out. Bye.